Burnt by the Mum by Daniel M. Watt. I have first-degree burns across the left side of my face, down my neck, across my chest and on my right thigh. I've had skin grafting on my face, but there is no hiding the fact that I'm deformed, which is why I find it easier to tell this story camera off, recorder on. So you don't see me, so you don't judge me, and you don't make me feel different. I was 6 when it happened. My mother was standing in the kitchen smoking. Back then we lived on the ground floor of a Victorian house. Apart from the kitchen there were 2 bedrooms and a high-ceilinged living room and a bathroom that I don't really remember anything about. The garden out back was lush and vast, my own personal playground. The neighbour who lived on the floor above was old and sickly. She made me think of the big jar of prunes my mother kept in the larder. That old lady would sit at her window and watch me run around that garden. Run, Danny boy! Place she never set foot in. I'd always wave to her. Hey, she never fucking waved back. She just stared, her face a portrait of loneliness. To be honest, there was something haunting about that whole goddamn place. And when you are that young, you have no notion of your mother being completely and utterly fucked in the head. I assumed that her behaviour, the shoplifting, the self-mutilation, the ceaseless crying, the feigning suicide, that was the norm. So okay, when I got to know other kids in later life, it all made sense. But back then she smoked 40 a day, no problem. Marlboros. She told me they were her best friend, that and the red wine. She always smoked in the kitchen. She stood in front of the window, even though it always stayed shut. I guess she liked that garden. Maybe it reminded her of being a child, a time before her trouble started. I had so many questions for her that I never asked her, and part of me regrets that today. I'd watch her face swamped in that stench, the burning tobacco creeping up towards her sad, thin lips. If she caught me looking, and trust me, I tried hard to stay hidden, she'd slap me, or kiss me, or cry. On that day, she had been arguing with my dad. He was late for work. She'd refused to take me to school. I sat on the stairs in my uniform, creased and unkempt, listening to them slay each other with their verbal armoury. I learnt that my mother was a lazy cunt, that my dad was a fucking pig. Doors were slammed, a plate was smashed. My dad grabbed me by the arm, dragged me out to the car and drove me to school. None of this is your fault, son. None of it. Yet even so young, I was familiar with that bitter taste of guilt. I felt it then in the kitchen. I, this little boy, was somehow to blame for everything. My mum had had me to prove the doctor's wrong, that her anorexic body could, contrary to medical opinion, bear forth a child. Now she had made her point. I was no more than baggage. Mum, can I have something to eat? I was holding my toy monkey in my arms. I held him as close as I could as I spoke. Mum! I loved that soft toy more than anything or anyone. Unlike my parents, he didn't require constant pitying. He never crushed me in a selfish hug. He never sought my love only when it suited him. He was warm and soft, not distant and drunk. Mum! I was always polite. I didn't shout or scream. I tried ever so hard not to sulk because only selfish little shits fucking sulked. She kept smoking, kept staring out of the window. Water boiled in a pan on the stove. You want something to eat? She looked at me over her shoulder. I nodded. What? Speak up. Yes. Yes, what? Yes. I'm hungry, Mum. Are you? And what about me? You think I'm not hungry? No one ever cooks for me, do they? Do they? I was scared. I had no idea what to say. Steam soaked the room. Smoke filled my nostrils. Can you think of nothing else but your fat stomach? You are just like your fucking father. She grabbed the pan from the stove and threw it at me. What I recall most is the sound of my skin burning. Not the pain, you understand. The sound. Followed by the smell of me cooking. I awoke in the ambulance. My vision was obscured by something that lay across my face, some sort of gauze, I guess. Still, I could make out my mother, hunched over, holding my hand, repeating over and over again, I'm sorry, 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 I'm so sorry. The nurses were real nice, the nicest people I'd ever met. It made me feel special. Mum brought me Monkey. Like me, he was scarred, melted in places. My dad was there throughout. Didn't say much, he never did. Somehow, though, he was different. He asked me a lot if I was okay. What did he expect me to say? I shrugged my shoulders and picked at the loose eye on Monkey. Dad started to spoil me. He bought me toys that would have been the envy of any kid my age. They cluttered the bedside table, the drawers. I played with them indifferently because they couldn't compensate for what I really needed. He brought me comics, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man and Hulk. He was leafing through them one afternoon towards the end of my stay in hospital. Christ. You know what these are all about? He waved a Batman comic in front of my face. I said nothing. Loneliness. How can they write this stuff for kids? Death, loss. Jesus Christ. As soon as I was discharged, Dad took me down to my grandparents. He told me, your mother's sick. She's in a special hospital for people with problems of the mind. I knew Batman's nemesis, the Joker, had such problems. He'd been in a special hospital. It was not a nice place to be. My mother began to spring up in my dreams as a white-faced ghoul, her damp, sweaty hair a sickly green, her red, putrefied lips cracked at the edges, the skin torn, flayed. Blood stained her teeth. She dribbled. Her tongue was black, sliding in and out of her mouth as if it had a life of its own. Now she would spit her words at me. Why so serious? Unlike the Joker, she never ever laughed. And I was never Batman in my dreams. That was the worst thing of all. I could never enact revenge. I stayed with my grandparents whilst life was sorted back home. That's how my grandmother put it to me anyway. Your dad and mum need time to think things through. They love you very much, but we all think it would be better if you stayed down here. Try school down here. Those first few months at school were tough. Deformity is as intoxicating to see as beauty. For a child, even more so. I was called ball in the bag by the older boys. I was called Moonface by my classmates. I looked through the telescope that my grandparents had bought me. I ran my hand across my burns that seemed to still sting, and I knew it was true. My face, my torso, they were a sea of valleys and craters. Mr. Morgan, my form teacher, worked hard to shield me from the volley of abuse. Maybe that's why I chose this profession. God knows I've set myself up for ridicule and hate as a result. Out of the frying pan into the fire, as it were.